Hi everyone, my name's Joe. I just started this little clothing thing called the Inward Markings Garment Company a few weeks ago. The lighting is better today, so how about that? And this is a vlog that I've committed to doing since launching the brand, and it's just to raise awareness of the brand, but also to share the experiences that I had in the formation of the brand and how they've connected to my life thus far. To find the YouTube link, you just need to go to inwardmarkings.com, where you can watch the first 13 chapters of this vlog, which you will need to do to make sense of what I talk about today. The Instagram handle is at inwardmarkings. Where was I? Oh yeah, I just wanted to touch on that car that I came across that was a primary part of the significant premonitionary dream that I talked about in chapter 13. The strange thing about that car is that after I left that morning, I just happened to be in that area a little while later. I thought, oh, I'll just go have a look at it again out of interest, and it just seemed to disappear. I don't know if I'd freak the owners out because there was something about that car and they thought, why is this guy appearing out of nowhere early in the morning talking about that car? But I've gone back on a number of occasions over 6, 7, 8 months, and it's never returned to that property, and I've never spoken to the people inside the house. I've knocked on the door a couple of times just to ask what happened to it, and just hoping that its status as a vintage vehicle might might allay their fears around who the fuck is this guy, because people get excited about things like that and could potentially knock on a stranger's door to inquire further about such items. So yeah, I've never seen that car again. It seemed to disappear. But that has occurred with other significant features of the period leading up to the brand launch. Like I walked into I was compelled to walk into this laneway into the city. When I say compelled, it's just this intuitive sense that I need to go in certain directions, regardless of whether I've been there before. And not infrequently, they are routes that I have not taken before. And so I've gone into this laneway, which I had gone into before. It's a very prominent laneway of the Melbourne CBD, and I hadn't been there in over a decade, and everything was just kind of just whatever. And then I suddenly froze in the middle kind of intersection of that laneway, because there's a cross lane, if you like, because there was this really large piece of street art, not a stencil, but an image that had been cut out and then pasted onto the wall of a angelic, demonic female character with horns but an angelic quality to her, that had the most transfixing gaze, and I was literally just frozen in that gaze. And similar to when feathers have fallen from the sky or have just blown up and caught my attention, it was like time just kind of stopped and everything stood still. And I kind of I shuffled around a little bit, and like with the Mona Lisa, or even though I've never seen it in person, the eyes just followed me every position I adopted. And the thing was, just like with the feathers, I'm looking around expecting other people to be similarly transfixed, or even just passing glances at it. Nothing. Everyone's just walking, going about their business without even glancing at this image. The image was so potent to me that even if I'd seen it a number of times before, I'd still end up like even giving it a sideways glance. It was the most incredible street art, and and as I'm standing there, it really felt like she was like not only looking at me, but with this, with some kind of connection to with me, and I felt the gaze like deep within me, and it just like it affected my entire body to the point where I found it difficult to kind of just keep walking on. And everyone else didn't even seem to notice it. Like I stood there for a good at least probably around 10 minutes, just like looking, transfixed in the gaze, kind of staying in the same spot and just looking around at everyone else's kind of response. And they seem to be like in a different dimension of sorts, or different kind of time band, different because I just felt completely like disconnected from everyone around me when in the gaze of this piece of street art. And it got to the point where I stopped this young woman passing by and I said, "Excuse me, do you see that piece of art on the wall there?" Because I was thinking, holy fuck, is it even there? And she stopped and turned around and ended up taking a photo of it. Even though I didn't suggest that or anything like that. I just wanted to know that someone else could see it. But then I went back like a little while later. I can't remember how long now, but not a huge length of time. At the most, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months at the very most. And it just, it wasn't there. And the weird thing about it is that I'm used to street art persisting for long periods of time, especially in Melbourne, where there's not there's not this like anti-graffiti campaign. It's in the CBD and inner city anyway, that would lead to work like that just disappearing as quickly as that. And I ended up asking the business across the laneway, "Do you guys remember?" They didn't remember. The staff members didn't remember the piece of art I was talking about, and it's never returned, and I've never seen that piece of art anywhere else. Like usually there's repetition, artists get around, but I've got a photo of it, thankfully, and I should share that. But really, I'm not here to prove to you guys that I'm speaking the truth. If you don't believe me, well then fuck, get on with your life. It's all good. But I should share that photo, in the interests of like the culture of the internet, I guess, at some point. The car not appearing again is not the first time that's happened. So the thing about my last period in Bangkok before I returned to Melbourne, Australia, is that I think it's fair to say that it was, in terms of my physical dependency to opiates, it was it was kind of the pinnacle, if you like, or it was basically my body was fully saturated with opiates because of my ready, legitimate access, which I controlled on my own terms. And I don't regret doing that at all. It's not like I'm saying now, "Oh god damn, I wish there'd been some kind of mediation or authority to intervene." However, that may not be the case for yourself. And again, I'm not putting this forward as some kind of guide to life. And in the same way, I wouldn't recommend a lot of things to people just based on another person's experience, because I think we all respond differently to different things because we are individuals, essentially. Please don't take this as fucking advice. If there's one thing I could advise you, don't take my life experience as advice. But my body had reached a point of exhaustion, I think. It just, like, I was still able to go about my daily business, but it was like the side effects of the medication, it was just like, and the intensive, those like trance-like periods, the first kind of 2-part flow state that I've talked about, I think my body was just like, "Oh fuck, okay, you've done what you've needed to do, next stage, please. But yeah, I was still able to, you know, to take care of business in terms of my daily functioning, etc. Because, I mean, the nature of my drug use and life experience was, you know, don't smoke cigarettes. Like there's a lot that I didn't do as well, and even though, you know, the limited worldview of too many people would be aghast at the life that I've led. There's so much that I didn't do. I wasn't a, you know, this, and no, I wasn't a fucking sex tourist. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. Oh, who fucking knows? All I can say is that any man that I met who had any kind of inklings in that direction is not someone I really had or have time for. But at least their money was going to people who used it and needed it, who used it for things that, you know, were important and they needed it. But fuck, I'm not, you know, those fucking men. But yeah, I was like so anyhow, I was, you know, I was doing okay regardless of, even though my body had reached a point where it was like ready to move on, and emotionally and mentally I was ready to move on as well, because it was also stressful. Even though I hadn't received any like attention and drama regarding my visa status, it was stressful because at any point a quick passport check or anything like that would have led to my incarceration again. I'm not recommending this to anyone. So there was a lot that was kind of, there was a lot of kind of pressure for me to go, okay, fuck this, let's do the next thing now. And what was weird is, but I had no way of getting my way back home because, see, I for, you know, because of judgment and people's cognitive fucking shortfalls, you know, I'm not the kind of person, I wasn't in a position where I could just call people up and say, I need help because I fucking reached a challenging situation. But what happened instead is that through the algorithms of the internet, it came to my attention that one of my siblings had her first book published, and this was heartening for me, and I you know, I congratulated her, etc., and made contact, and without any expectation, I was just stoked that it had happened, but I don't know if I hadn't have made that contact regarding the book, I don't know if the same thing would have panned out, because I've never actually asked whether it was that contact that led to what happened next. But my sister and her family decided to, instead of going to their typical kind of annual vacation spot, they decided to go to southern Thailand, and invited me along and brought my mother along with them as well. Now, as I've mentioned in an early chapter, my siblings especially, but my family in general, aren't the kind of people who can see past certain things to the point where they're like, you know, this person's still a human, so, and, you know, a family member or someone we love or a friend, so let's just fucking put aside any kind of things that we're unsure of in terms of our perception of the world and just fucking have a good time, because you know, it's very possible, and it's possible in so many cases with so many people. So it was striking that this occurred, but it occurred, and my opinion regarding their motivation for doing it, because my sister really led the charge, is something I might share later. But I don't think it was transparent. I don't think it was transparent initially. What also happened, along with making contact with my sister regarding her book, is that I wrote a letter to my mum, So that may have contributed to it. Um, but yeah, so many things are mixed, including motivations. Um, and so anyway, I found myself in the holiday resort city of Phuket, which I never ventured down to in all that time that I was in Thailand, um, because there seemed to be nothing that I wanted to see there. Um, Fucking dickheads treating the locals like shit while getting really drunk. That's not my thing. And so I think a new Hooters opened up there and so forth. Look, do what you fucking want, but you know, if your life is trash, I got no time for it. So the right, and so I expressed concerns to a friend over social media during this period about returning to Melbourne, because I was like, you know, I really want to move on from this stage of my life, and including opiates. And Melbourne is like awash with opiates, and I'm just, you know, I'm going to be in the inner city, and I'm just concerned about, you know, this kind of this deep connection I have with drug use, and didn't really get an answer, which is not what I expected, and it's not what you get with these things. But it was important to get back. Like, with everything considered, regardless of my apprehension, it was important to get back. And so spent time in Phuket. What was cool about Phuket was going to the ocean, which I hadn't done in so long. In my whole time. Like, Chiang Mai obviously doesn't have oceans. And definitely, Bangkok, yeah, no, definitely not. You know, and I just was never attracted to even those close by, like, beach cities and towns, because of what I've mentioned. So just proceeded to. So my sister and her family returned to Australia, and then my mother agreed to help me to return to Melbourne. So, but she returned as well, and then came back, and we both left Bangkok together. And so this was early 2018. So, you know, the impact that Taylor Swift's music had on me up until that point was still very strong at this stage. Reputation, the album Reputation, had been released toward the end of 2017, and I was anticipating it avidly, and was still really listening to 1989 a lot, as well as Troye Sivan's Blue Neighborhood, which I still listen to. It was incredible. But in terms of Taylor Swift, when Reputation was released, it resonated so fucking deeply. It was very intense. Like, 1989 was so overpowering, so powerful and overpowering, I guess, in a way, but in the best way. And then Reputation, I just could not believe how deeply it resonated with me. It was just like the perfect successive album, like the perfect next step in, like, her musical career. Every song, I mean, the first single was just like, oh my god, this is so fucking good. This is perfect. This is like, it was just like a further extension of, like, the boldness and the badass kind of creativity that I'd realized of her career thus far. And so that album was really a big part of what I was doing as I made the transition from Bangkok to Melbourne. Now, this is what's curious. Melbourne, as I've explained previously, is where I really, I guess you could say it was where my opiate dependency was established. And this is what I'm still just... So, given what I've just talked about in terms of the context, so flew back to Melbourne, I think it was February 11, but I need to confirm that, but it was around February 11. and wasn't thinking too much about the apprehension that I mentioned earlier. I just was like, kind of, I guess, worn out from traveling and glad to have the next stage sorted out, but entirely without expectation. Upon arrival in Melbourne, where my opiate dependency began, I have no explanation for it, but everything just left me as soon as I landed in Melbourne. Not before, not during the plane ride, but as soon as I touched down in Melbourne, something changed in my entire body and especially my brain. The only way I can describe it is that my brain went into a completely meditative state. Every craving that I've had regarding drugs, any connection that I've had regarding drugs, disappeared. It just fucking left me. But not only that, negative emotions that were tied up in my drug use but existed pre-drug use and had this way of like getting deep into my core and under my skin and sticking with me, just also disappeared and never seemed to be able to gain traction within me. Subsequent to my arrival in Melbourne, everything just left, and I felt like I was kind of floating. But it happened upon my landing in Melbourne. It is the most curious thing, and it's only gotten stronger over time, and I've tested myself in numerous ways, deliberately walking through areas where the drug market is strong, having encounters or experiences where certain emotions will arise. They're not so much deliberate, but and the negativity just does not seem to be able to stick. It's like Teflon, some kind of emotional Teflon, and life has just continually gotten better and better over time since February 2018, after landing in Melbourne. And that's where I'll leave it. But there's a great quote. I think it's Rumi. Humans typically lead two lives, one after they're born and one before they die. And I very much feel like I'm well and truly in that second life, because not only does that first half seem alien or foreign to me, like in a total way, but everything's changed. To quote a Taylor Swift song, or to paraphrase a Taylor Swift song, everything has literally changed. Okay, see ya.